Arrogant CEO fires waitress for being too ugly, she walked back. And 3 years later, as his new boss, the rain drummed softly against the diner windows as Sarah wiped down the last table, her reflection barely visible in the glass. 25 years old. She'd been pouring coffee at Milton's diner for 3 years now, long enough to know every regular's order by heart, long enough to feel invisible. She'd stopped looking in mirrors the way she used to, stopped believing in the dreams she'd whispered to herself during college. Tonight, as she untied her apron with trembling fingers, she could still hear his words from that afternoon cold, cutting words that had sliced through her like winter wind. The CEO who'd come in with his expensive suit and cruel smile, who'd complained about everything, then looked at her with disgust and said things no person should ever hear. Her manager had simply shrugged, too afraid to defend her. Sarah had smiled through her shift, but now alone in the quiet, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Asterisk, asterisk, where are you watching from tonight? Asterisk, asterisk. Sarah had always loved mornings at the diner before the rush. Those quiet moments when dawn light spilled golden through the windows, and she could hear the coffee maker gurgle while Mr. Peterson read his newspaper in the corner booth. He'd been coming in for 20 years. Always left her a $5 tip on a $3 breakfast. Always called her young lady with grandfatherly warmth. There was Mrs. Chen, who ordered the same blueberry pancakes every Saturday and showed Sarah pictures of her grandchildren. These people made the long shifts bearable, made her feel seen. But lately, something had shifted inside her. She'd graduated with a business degree 2 years ago, full of ideas about management and innovation, but student loans and her mother's medical bills had kept her here, pouring coffee instead of building something of her own. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself she was saving up. But the truth lived in her bathroom mirror each morning, in the tired eyes that stared back, in the dreams that felt further away with each passing month. That afternoon, everything changed. A group of executives had walked in, led by a man in his 40s with silver at his temples and ice in his eyes, Marcus Whitfield, CEO of Whitfield Industries, the manufacturing company that employed half the town. Sarah had served them with her usual kindness, refilling waters, making sure everything was perfect, but nothing satisfied Marcus. The coffee was too weak, the food too slow. His eyes had traveled over her with cold assessment, and then he'd said it, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. This is why I don't invest in local establishments. They hire anyone off the street. Look at her, barely presentable. Fire her, or I'll make sure every business owner in town knows what kind of standards you keep. The diner had gone silent. Sarah's face burned. Her manager, Tom, had looked away, mumbling something about talking later. Marcus had dropped cash on the table and walked out, never looking back, never seeing the girl whose world he'd just shattered with careless cruelty. That night, Sarah sat in her small apartment and made a decision that frightened and thrilled her in equal measure. The next morning, Sarah didn't go to work. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and wrote down everything she knew about business. Everything she'd learned in college. Everything she'd observed watching Tom run the diner inefficiently for years. Her hands shook as she wrote, but her mind felt clearer than it had in months. She thought about Marcus Whitfield's cruel eyes, about how men like him move through the world, breaking things without consequence, and something hard and bright formed in her chest, not hatred, but determination. She gave Tom 2 weeks' notice. He seemed relieved, never mentioning that awful afternoon, never apologizing for his silence. Mr. Peterson, though, had hugged her on her last day, pressing an envelope into her hands. "You're meant for bigger things, young lady," he'd said, his eyes knowing. Inside was $500 and a note. Asterisk, for your dreams. I've been watching you think for 3 years now. Go do it, asterisk. Sarah cried in her car that day, good tears. The kind that wash things clean. She'd spent the next 6 months working 2 jobs, saving every penny, researching business loans and small manufacturing processes. Her idea was simple, but personal, sustainable, affordable kitchenware made from recycled materials. She'd seen how the town's factory workers struggled, how Whitfield Industries had laid off dozens while Marcus bought his 3rd vacation home. She'd seen the waste, the inefficiency, the way corporate greed had hollowed out her community. She started small an online store. Working from her apartment, partnering with local craftspeople who needed income, her products were beautiful, functional, and honest. She named her company Milton's, after the diner, after the place where she'd learned to serve people, to listen, to care. The company grew slowly, then faster. Sarah worked 8-hour days, learning everything: supply chains, marketing, customer service. She was building something that mattered. At a local business expo, a woman named Patricia approached her table. Patricia was elegant, sharp-eyed, in her 60s, a former executive who'd left the corporate world disgusted by its values. She looked at Sarah's products, asked pointed questions, then smiled. "I've been looking for something real to invest in. Something with heart. Let's talk. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up." Within a year, with Patricia's mentorship and investment, Milton's had outgrown Sarah's apartment. They leased a small facility, hired 15 employees, many of them former Whitfield workers. Sarah learned to lead with kindness and clarity, to see her employees as whole people, not expendable resources. And as her company grew, as orders came in from across the country, she heard whispers: Whitfield Industries was struggling. Marcus had made bad investments, burned bridges, lost contracts. The town that had once feared him now quietly celebrated his stumbling. But Sarah's success hadn't come without cost. The stress of rapid growth, the pressure of being responsible for 15 families' livelihoods, the loneliness of leadership, it all crashed down on her one Friday evening when a major investor pulled out unexpectedly, citing concerns about her youth and inexperience. Sarah sat alone in her office long after everyone had gone home, staring at spreadsheets that suddenly looked impossible, feeling the weight of every decision she'd made. For a moment, she let herself break. She thought about that day in the diner, about Marcus's words, about how maybe he'd been right, maybe she wasn't enough, wasn't ready, wasn't strong enough for this. The tears came hot and bitter, and she let them fall onto the desk where she'd signed paychecks that morning, where she'd written thank you notes to employees who'd trusted her with their futures. Then her phone rang. It was Emma, one of her first hires, a single mother who'd been laid off by Whitfield Industries. "Sarah, I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter drew you a picture today. You're her hero. She says you gave her mommy back. I know you're probably busy, but I wanted you to know what you've built here. It's not just a company. It's our second chance." Sarah closed her eyes, letting Emma's words settle into her bones. She thought about Mr. Peterson's envelope, about Patricia's faith, about the 15 people who showed up every day believing in what they were building together. She thought about the girl she'd been 3 years ago, afraid and small, and the woman she'd become, not because she was fearless, but because she'd chosen to be brave anyway. That night, she rewrote her business plan. She reached out to other investors, refined her pitch, leaned into her story instead of hiding from it. And slowly, things turned around. A sustainable products consortium reached out, interested in partnership. Orders increased. Milton stabilized, then thrived. Asterisk, have you ever faced something like this? Share your story in the comments. Asterisk, then came the phone call that changed everything. Patricia's voice was carefully neutral. "Sarah, there's something you should know. Whitfield Industries is declaring bankruptcy. The board is looking for a buyer. With our growth, with our capital, we could acquire them. The facility, the contracts, everything. It would triple our capacity overnight." Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. Marcus Whitfield's company. The opportunity felt like providence and peril wrapped together. The decision took Sarah 3 sleepless nights. Acquiring Whitfield Industries made perfect business sense. The facility was well equipped, existing contracts valuable, the workforce skilled. But it also meant confronting the man who'd tried to destroy her spirit. Meant walking back into a past she'd worked so hard to rise above. Patricia had been wise as always. "You're not doing this for revenge, Sarah. You're doing this because you can run that company better than he ever did. Because those workers deserve a leader who values them. Because it's the right move for Milton's." Don't let his shadow make your decisions. You're beyond that now. The acquisition went through in late November. Sarah insisted on being present the day they took ownership. Walking through the facility with her team, meeting every employee personally, promising transparency and respect. The workers, many who remembered her from the diner days, looked at her with something. Between hope and disbelief, Marcus was there too, contractually obligated to facilitate the transition. Sarah had imagined this moment countless times, rehearsed cutting words that might balance the scales. But when she finally stood in the conference room across from him, seeing how diminished he looked, how the arrogance had curdled into bitterness, she felt something unexpected. Pity. "Mr. Whitfield," she said quietly, professionally. "I remember you. 3 years ago, you came into Milton's diner where I worked. You said I was barely presentable? You tried to have me fired." She paused, watching recognition flicker in his eyes, watching his face pale. "I want you to know something. I didn't build my company to prove you wrong. I built it because I knew I could do better. Because I believe people deserve to work in places where they're valued, where they're seen. That's what this facility will become now." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. For once, he had nothing to say. "I won't keep you in any position here," Sarah continued, her voice steady. "But I will honor your severance fully, and I'll provide references that reflect your technical knowledge. Because this isn't about revenge. It's about building something better. Asterisk, asterisk, if you've been enjoying this story. Subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Asterisk, asterisk, as Marcus gathered his things to leave, he stopped at the door. "I was cruel to you that day," he said, the words clearly costing him. "I've been cruel to many people. I thought power meant never showing weakness, never seeing others as... I was wrong. I hope you do better with this place than I did." It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was acknowledgement, and somehow, that was enough. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the redesigned headquarters of Milton's Industries, the name she'd given to the merged company, watching spring sunlight pour through windows she'd insisted on expanding. The facility hummed with productive energy, with workers who now had profit-sharing plans, mental health days, and a boss who knew most of their names. Productivity had increased 40%. Employee satisfaction scores were the highest in the region. They'd just landed their biggest contract yet, a national retail chain wanting to stock their sustainable products. But Sarah's proudest moment came on a Tuesday morning when she stopped by the reopened Milton's Diner. Tom had sold it to Mr. Peterson's daughter, who'd transformed it into a thriving community space. Sarah sat in her old corner booth, drinking coffee that was still perfectly strong. And Emma's daughter ran up to her with a drawing, a woman with a crown, standing in front of a factory, surrounded by smiling people. "That's you," the little girl said shyly. "Mama says you're the queen of second chances." Sarah hugged that child tight, tears blurring her vision, thinking about the girl she'd been afraid, dismissed, invisible, and the woman she'd become. Not because she was perfect, not because she never doubted, but because she'd chosen to build instead of break, to lead with heart instead of cruelty. To prove that kindness and success weren't enemies but partners, she thought about Marcus sometimes. Heard he'd moved out of state, started consulting work, apparently learning slowly to treat people with basic dignity. She hoped it was true. Mostly, though, she thought about her employees, her team, the community that had rallied around her vision. She thought about Patricia, who'd joined her board and become the mentor she'd needed. She thought about all the young people who wrote to her now, asking how she'd done it, and she always told them the same truth. Start where you are. Build with integrity. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how others see you. It's determined by how you see yourself and others. On her way out of the diner that morning, Sarah paused at the window, catching her reflection, no longer the tired, invisible waitress, but a woman comfortable in her own skin, proud of what she'd built, grateful for every hard lesson that had shaped her. The rain had stopped. The sun was bright. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sarah looked at herself and smiled. Really smiled. Because she knew something true and beautiful. She had become exactly who she was always meant to be. Asterisk, asterisk. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more. Thank you for spending your time with us today. ***.